Hi everyone. My name is Katie Breslin. I am filling in for Andrew here on our Google Hangout, and I am joined by Amelia, our
Hi.
Legislative Director of Domestic Policy. You are all here because of our Spring Lobby Weekend. I hope that you all have gotten an invitation to our Spring Lobby Weekend. It is on income inequality, and so Amelia, who is our lead lobbyist on income inequality, has decided to join us to talk a little bit of the wonky tonk of what we're doing here, what we're advocating for, so that you all, when you come on March 18th to the 21st in Washington, D.C., know what you're getting yourself into. So first, to kind of start us off, Amelia, thank you so much for joining us today. Let's talk a little bit about when we talk about income inequality here at the Friends Committee on National Legislation. What does that mean? What are we talking about? What is our policy proposal and statement on that?
Sure. Well, that's a great question, Katie. So as I'm sure many of you know, we have kind of reached record levels of income inequality in this country. Especially since the 1970s, we've really seen wages stagnate kind of for most of the population, where for those at the very top, their income and wealth has kind of grown exponentially. And we think this is bad for a number of reasons. It's bad for society, it's bad morally. It's also just bad for economic growth and the future of our country. And it kind of is another kind of way in which we tell ourselves that we live in this country where, you know, it's about hard work, and we know that there are a lot of things that kind of inhibit that kind of myth of the American dream. But this is one of those kind of central things, and it really should be that your station in life is not determined by where or who you're born to, but kind of your ability to work hard and play by the rules and that sort of thing. So we want to try and push policies and see policies enacted that would help kind of curb this growing income inequality and set us on our economy on a different track, really benefit much more of the population here in the country.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that explanation. We pick issues for Spring Lobby Weekend that we think are issues that need voices, specifically young adult voices in the room, and Congress needs to hear from. We pick issues for Spring Lobby Weekend and annual meeting, which is coming up, that we think Congress will be moving on. What are some of the signs and evidence? I know that we don't know what will happen with the election, and I'm sure that will have an impact on a lot of different things in Congress, but why Spring Lobby Weekend? Why is it on income inequality this year? What are some of the signs that you're seeing?
Well, we think this is a really, really opportune moment, especially on this issue, especially right now. So this election season has been unprecedented in many ways, but one thing that we've noticed is we've seen it in both the Bernie Sanders campaign and to some extent in the Trump campaign as well, as this growing concern around our kind of these levels of income inequality and the trajectory that our country is on with our economy, how it doesn't really work for so many people in this country. And so whoever wins the election in November, there's going to be some pressure to try and address this. And we believe that in the first 100 days of Congress, you know, we hear a lot about the first 100 days, and the next administration, they put out kind of what are the top number one thing that they want to try and accomplish in that time. We think this is something that really could move. We could see we've in conversations with folks on Capitol Hill and reports that we've been reading, we think it's very likely that we could see some sort of jobs infrastructure bill coming out in the first 100 days. And we want to make sure that that bill is really crafted in a way that would start to kind of correct this kind of path that we've been on, that would really help create kind of good jobs for more people in this country that actually provide the sort of wages and support that enable people to to move up the economic ladder, provide for their families, secure a bright future for their kids.
Absolutely. So when we're thinking about proposals, what are some of the dream things, or maybe not even dream things, but the practical things that we think could be in a legislation, a job and infrastructure bill in the first 100 days of Congress?
Sure. So before I get to the specific kind of policies, I do want to say one more thing on why this first 100 days or first year is so key, right? And one of that is the times when we have seen the biggest kind of pieces of legislation move and the biggest advancements policy-wise and legislative-wise, they happen within that first year of a new administration and a new Congress. So we only get this opportunity once every 4 to 8 years, and that topic shifts, right, at each time. And so this time, this focus on the economy and on income inequality, we have a very short window of time when we can really try and get this done. And so that is why this is so very exciting and such an opportunity. When we're talking about, okay, well, in this proposal, what are some specific kind of policies that we want to push and see in there? Well, one of the things that kind of we look at is, okay, what is politically feasible? What can we actually get done? Where is there needed voice for this? And so I would say the first thing that we are looking at is expanding or making sure that our largest, most effective anti-poverty economic mobility program in this country, with something called the Earned Income Tax Credit, that is available to people who aren't raising kids and for individuals who are under the age of 25. Right now, that group is largely excluded, and many of them are actually taxed into poverty. And so we want to make sure that a program right now that helps millions of people, keeps them from falling into poverty, helps millions of them move into the middle class. Program is available to adults who don't have kids or aren't raising kids, and for younger workers who are under the age of 25. So that's one thing. Another thing is we want to kind of modernize our unemployment insurance system. Our unemployment insurance system, it was created 80 years ago. Our economy has changed a lot recently. And so a lot of people no longer are eligible for this benefit when they become unemployed. We currently are in a situation where only 1 in 4 unemployed individuals actually claims unemployment insurance, right? That tells us something. The other fact is that we're in year 7 of an economic expansion, and it is we're not going to keep expanding all that much, for years on end. And so we know that kind of historically speaking, we're going to see another economic downturn likely in the next few years. And right now, we're not prepared, and our unemployment insurance system is not prepared. So we want to make sure that we do some reforms that help ensure that more people are eligible, and that it's that responsive to how our workforce has changed. So that's another thing that we want to see happen. And the third thing that we want to see happen, and you've probably heard it talked about a lot on the campaign trails, is we're seeing more women in the workforce. We're seeing a lot more 2-earner households, and so things like affordable childcare, paid family leave, paid sick leave, predictable hours. All these things are essential for enabling parents to be able to work and keep their jobs. You shouldn't have to kind of choose between, should I stay home with the sick kid, but if I do that, then I lose a day's pay, so I think a lot of those things, we think we need to see that happen.
That's great. So you talked a little bit about and thinking about who our economy is drafted for, and who our economy is really benefiting and who it's not benefiting. Thinking about who are some of the people that are benefiting from this economy, and who are some of the people that are being left behind by the way that we are currently, the way that our tax code is written, the way that our economic policies are written, who's being left out of that conversation?
So that's a great question. I mean, our tax code is structured in a way that really does benefit people who already have significant wealth. And so that's one area where compiles kind of people who are already wealthy end up are able to take advantage of the tax code in ways that further benefit them. So that is one area. Unfortunately, the ability to have some real progressive tax reform in the next year or so, that's a real challenge. That's a real challenge. And so we're looking at kind of what are some other ways in which we can kind of get some real policy advances that could really address and help our economy work better for more people. So you're asking about kind of who currently is left out of the kind of economic system as it is, or our different policies and how they benefit certain groups of people. So certainly those individuals with low-paying jobs tend to be definitely have much less power when it comes to how a lot of these policies are written. So one thing that we've seen are this increase in part-time work, this increase in independent contractors, these increase in unpredictable hours, on-call hours. And so that type of work scheduling really leaves people vulnerable, where you don't know from one week to the next what your pay is going to be, how much income you're going to make, what your schedule is going to be like. And we know that those types of jobs tend to be lower wage workers. They tend to disproportionately be women and people of color. We also have seen kind of the history in which a lot of our policies have been very discriminatory towards certain groups. Certainly the legacy of our discriminatory housing policy, of employment discrimination, of the ways in which our education system has worked. And see, the big thing is all those things contribute to wealth and the ability to grow wealth. And wealth is passed on from generation to generation. And so that's where we get a situation where we have an enormous racial wealth gap in this country. That is another thing that we really need to address.
Yeah. And when we're talking about the earned income tax credit, which sounds, or as the wonks in the office call it, the EITC, or modernizing unemployment, or looking at, very practical solutions to, families who have children. What do you think, specifically thinking about the EITC, how do you think that who's not eligible for it, who's being left out of that conversation? And what is, for me, I'm under 25, which is a shocker. I'm not one of the people that benefits from the full EITC as an unmarried 25-year-old. But what are some of the ways that, what am I missing out on? What are some of the, what's the average EITC even there? Yeah,
so that's a great question. So right now, the earned income tax credit for families with kids, that average benefit is a little over $3,000. And that's a big chunk of money that you get around tax time and can be put towards savings. It can be put towards helping to put a down payment on a house, or saving for educational expenses later student loans. It's a huge way to help ensure kind of financial stability over the long term. For individuals without kids, the average benefit is a little under $300. Huge difference. And for individuals who are under age 25, can't claim it at all. And so this is an area where we think, especially younger individuals, when you're first starting out, the EITC has been shown to really help people that attachment to the labor force, to getting that job, to be able to provide enough to be able to be able to regularly put food on the table and provide for yourself and your family. I think one thing that I think is, and this is just one example of some of the people who would be benefited by expansion to the EITC, or what we like to say, fixing this glaring gap in the EITC that essentially excludes such a huge population. A big topic of conversation right now on Capitol Hill, and something that we've been working on a lot, is criminal justice reform, right? And when we think about individuals who are returning citizens, people who formerly incarcerated individuals, they are oftentimes the most vulnerable in terms of being able to get a job. And once they are able to get a job, wages are usually much, much lower. And so this is a prime group, but a lot of times many individuals who are formerly incarcerated and are kind of returning to their families or to their communities, they're oftentimes non-custodial parents or don't have kids. And so this is an essential group that really could benefit from the EITC and can help that reentry process in many ways.
Yeah, it's almost like we, as human beings, deal with multiple issues at a time. And so looking at how these intersections of issues really work together when we talk about incarcerated families and economic justice. So I'm a recent grad. I graduated in 2013. I had a lot of friends that were unemployed, and so unemployment is something that was really terrifying to me. So when we talk about modernizing unemployment, what are some of the ways that someone who's coming out of college and might be afraid to face the workforce with, with the unemployment the way that it was, especially in the 2008 and 2009, what are some of the ways that we can really modernize that proposal?
That's a great question. So I think there are three ways that we look at this. So first off is retraining and reemployment services. So it used to be back in the day when you lost your job, you could be expected to get another job that was relatively similar, maybe within the same sector. And our economy has really shifted, and so all those manufacturing jobs that we used to have, we just don't have anymore. And so for a lot of people, they need to be retrained or get some additional skills or education to be able to get that next job. And so we need to be putting in resources and providing those services for individuals. Another thing is that eligibility is a real problem. And so we need to do a better job at ensuring standardized eligibility. We're seeing, as we talked about earlier, many more women in the workforce, right? And it tends to be that when you have a child born or a parent gets sick, it's usually the women who will reduce their hours or take time off to take care of a child or another family member. Well, when you do this, oftentimes you can then, especially if you leave the workforce for a short period of time, you're then no longer eligible for unemployment insurance. So those are some things that women tend to, when you reduce your hours, you get paid less, and that impacts how much you're getting for unemployment insurance as well. Also, we're seeing a lot more independent contractors than we have in the past, and those individuals are not eligible for unemployment insurance as well. A lot of employers specifically do certain things to try and skirt around that. And then, you talked about coming out of college, and this is the third piece. For people who have had, either they've left the workforce for a long period of time and are coming back, or maybe newly entering the workforce after graduating, or as I was talking about before, some of those independent contractors who just aren't eligible at all for unemployment insurance. Well, we would push for something called a job seekers allowance, or a temporary assistance, because it takes money to be able to get that job, right? You need to print out your resume. You need money to be able to take the bus to that interview. You need to be able to have appropriate interview clothes. So and be able to eat and provide housing for yourself. And so all these things take resources. And so that's another kind of aspect that we want to see.
That's awesome. So when you hear people say, these types of programs, these requirements, these regulations, stop economic growth, what would you say to people that think that the proposals that we're suggesting might actually stop regulation?
Well, I think actually it's the opposite. These are the things that really help our economy grow. They help build demand, right? More money in people's pockets means they're going out and spending that money in their local communities, boosting demand, especially something like unemployment insurance, right? That's something that, especially is counter-cyclical. It's when we hit a recession, more people need that benefit because more people are unemployed, and that gives them the income to help stabilize, kind of provide some financial security for themselves and their families, and it ensures that people are actually continue to go out and spend money in their communities, which can help buffer some of the economic downturn. So that's a key thing, I think, as with the EITC, there have been studies that show just the economic growth, or you get a real bang for your buck for that, and it actually leads to much more economic growth for each individual dollar that's spent on that. I think one thing that's really key is when we're talking about investing in communities and individuals that tend to be lower income. For most people, each additional dollar, especially if you're tight financially, you're gonna need to go out and spend every additional dollar. Whereas people, kind of wealthier individuals, will tend to save that money. And so, if you want quicker boosts in demand, businesses want more customers, it makes more sense.
That makes a lot of sense to me. So we're sitting across the street from the Senate Park building, and we do quite a bit of lobbying in Congress and with the legislative branch, but we also do some work with the executive branch as well here at FCNL. What are some of the proposals that, could be done at the executive branch level, and what are some of the, and obviously you talked a little bit more about the legislative branch, but how do they differentiate?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one thing that's been talked about a lot, and it's been really hard to get movement on, is raising the minimum wage. It's just politically, it's very, very difficult to get that through Congress at the federal level. But the executive branch has been doing different things to try and act as a model employer. Certainly we have many federal employees and then federal contractors as well. And so they raised their minimum wage so that federal contractors now have to pay a minimum wage of $10 an hour. They've also just came out with a rule just a couple weeks ago for paid sick leave. And so and in doing this, I think the executive branch is not just trying to provide these benefits or ensure a certain level of kind of certain standards for employers that they want those that for their own employees and people that they do business with, but also kind of setting an example and encouraging other businesses to do the same. And so they've been kind of using their ability to encourage that among other businesses as well. So you can get some stuff done at the federal level in that way. We've been pushing for expansion for fair chance hiring, or sort of ban the box hiring with federal and contract workers as well. But again, we also need legislation. It's a both and, because we need this sort of thing to apply to everyone.
That's really great. And so because we're a faith organization, and a lot of the work that we do is really grounded in our faith tradition and our faith tradition, what is the role of the faith community in this, and in particular organizing around poverty? and what are some of the other faith groups that work in this arena, the interfaith, and what is, on that note, like what is the role of secular organizations in doing this work as well?
Well, that's a great question. I think, the faith community and the faith voice is tremendously powerful in a very unique way. It's kind of the ability to come and talk about this. Yes, it's an economic issue. Yes, it is, it addresses, just touches on so many different issues, but it's also a moral issue. And coming from kind of that faith perspective, we're able to talk about that in a way. And we work a lot in coalition with other faith organizations, denominations, faith traditions. And it's something really special when you're able to get all sorts of Christian denominations, Jewish organizations, Islamic organizations to come together and say, there's a lot we disagree on, but we all agree on this, and our sacred texts all affirm the need to kind of prioritize and give specific attention to the conditions of more vulnerable individuals, people struggling in poverty. And this is something that we all kind of, we take this lens when we're looking at federal policy. And being able to come with that message, I think is particularly powerful, especially when we're doing it in coalition with so many other faith groups and faith advocates. And, it's when you step into an office with that kind of message and from that kind of space, it's also received by, I think, congressional offices in a very different way, in a very powerful way. And so when, both when we're doing it on Capitol Hill, but certainly when it's coming directly from constituents saying, I'm doing this partly because of my own interests maybe, but also because I'm moved by something bigger. That is so powerful. When I go to Capitol Hill and when I'm talking with congressional offices, a lot of these staffers spend a lot of time talking to special interests, and to be able to come in and say, I'm not doing this just because I think it's going to help me. I'm doing this because this is the right thing to do, and this is what we need to be doing to kind of to get to that vision of this country and this world that we know it can be. And so that is a message that these guys on Capitol Hill don't often hear. And it's a refreshing one and a very much needed one.
Yeah. How do we work? So we work obviously with interfaith groups, but do we work in broader coalitions as well on this issue?
Yes, great question. So yeah, we have a lot of secular partners as well. And we work with both other kind of advocacy or grassroots organizations that we talk to. We also work with a lot of different service organizations. And so that brings, and some of them are faith-based and some of them are secular, but that brings another perspective of people able to say, we're providing these services on the ground and this is what the situation really is like. I think a lot of times folks on Capitol Hill are, they'll go back to their districts a lot, but some of what they're actually seeing and experiencing is not necessarily the same thing that a lot of people who are working at a lot of these service organizations or agencies necessarily are encountering, or what people are living every single day. And being able to share those stories and that reality with policymakers is absolutely essential.
Yeah. So I'm feeling fired up. I don't know if you are, but so if someone is viewing this now and wants to know what can they do right now, and then if they don't have time right now, what can they do after the election to really make sure that this issue gets pushed out?
So I think in my time doing this work, I have kind of grown increasingly convinced, if there's a word to be more than convinced, that's what this is that members of Congress are moved by what they hear in their districts. They're moved by their constituents. So a lot of times I can go into offices and I can kind of talk about why these policies are good. I can give facts and data, and that's all well and good. And staffers, I think, appreciate that and listen to that and take that seriously. But what really moves members of Congress and also helps move them from saying, oh yeah, I agree with this, it sounds good, to really championing an issue and pushing it and making sure it gets done and talking to their colleagues and saying this needs to get done, is when they hear about it from their constituents. So your ability to go out and talk to your members of Congress, either to get in this election season, either going to town hall meetings or candidate forums or different events, if it's, afterwards, scheduling meetings with them, getting to know, we're going to have a lot of new members of Congress, and if there's someone new is representing your district or your state, getting in front of them, developing that relationship, talking to them. It's real. I mean, that is just so important. And scheduling, as I said, scheduling visits, but bringing your friends along, bringing people in your community along, and getting them to also, write those letters, make those phone calls, or schedule a visit with that congressional office.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. Well, that's all the questions that I have. But thank you so much for joining us, Amelia.
Thank you, Katie.
And remember, Spring Lobby Weekend, March 18th to the 21st. You can find it on our website at fcnl.org/SLW. So again, I'm Katie Breslin. I'm the Advocacy Corps Coordinator here at FCNL, and Amelia Kegan, our Legislative Director of Domestic Policy. And we're so excited to have you, and thank you very much for joining us today.